I know I've arrived at the Royal Academy of Music in 1945, but I feel I've not done justice to the war years. It wasn't only that I was at Ackworth School, but there were other elements of my life. And of course, I did mention rationing. So I thought I would find some official document that told us just how the rationing went. And for most of the war, you had 4 ounces of bacon and ham a week, 2 ounces of butter, the value of 1 shilling and 2pence of other meat, that's the equivalent to a couple of chops per week, butter 2 ounces, cheese 2 ounces, margarine 4 ounces, cooking fat 4 ounces, 3 pints of milk a week, 8 ounces of sugar, a pound of preserves, I presume that's jam and the like, every 2 months, 2 ounces of tea, 1 fresh egg, plus an allowance of dried egg. And dried egg can be made into the most awful alleged omelettes and so on. And sweets, 12 ounces every 4 weeks. Then, of course, one of the first things that was rationed was petrol. And so it did restrict life. At Ackworth School, of course, we got our own farm. And so we had a lot of off-ration things. Fruit and vegetables were never on ration. But of course, foreign fruit was not around. And even in 1946, a year after the war had finished, you could only have a banana if you had a ration book for somebody under 17. And we'll come to that later. And what were my parents doing after they'd left Wennington School? Well, they signed up for Friends War Relief Service, a Quaker organisation, and they were sent straight away to the Duke of Bedford's estate. Now, I think the Duke of Bedford had accepted having some evacuees on the estate rather than having the army take it over, which is what happened to a number of country houses. And the butler would drive round in a car to give my parents a few eggs off the ration on a silver salver. And of course they couldn't pay the butler, they had to go to the secretary to pay. Now the secretary was somebody who loved talking. And one story she had has never got into the public domain. It's well known that a number of the aristocracy were friendly with Hitler before the war. Whether that was the case of the Duke of Bedford, I don't know, but one day he was going off to Scotland. He said to the secretary, this is during the war, said to the secretary, Rudolf Hess might fly in. If so, just look after him. And the secretary said, I'll look after him all right, I'll put him in the bison field. But considering that the Duke of Bedford was off to Scotland, and that was in fact where Rudolf Hess landed, it's a very interesting little footnote. They were then said when the evacuees were all settled in the Duke of Bedford's place, they were moved to a village near to Petersfield. Now there was a double row of wooden hop pickers' huts at the top of a field. I mean at the top of the field because there was quite a sharp drop in front of them. Wooden huts, 10 foot by 10 foot, each one occupied by a family, whatever size the family, with a foot square of window with no glass in, and outside a very nasty cesspit area. So there were various things to be done. First of all, they set up a marquee at the bottom end of the field for evening entertainments. These people were from Portsmouth, and the bombing frightened them so much they wanted to find somewhere in the country. The only place they knew was the hop pickers' huts that they went to every September. So they just evacuated themselves, no facilities. There was a water tap about half a mile away, and I can remember trudging to it through the chalky dust in dry weather and chalky mud in wet weather. And they built out they put a concrete path right front and back of these huts, built out the roof to make a bit of a veranda, and there was a team of about 3 Quakers living in caravans. The one my parents were in had been owned by a famous theatrical couple, very much an old-fashioned sort of caravan. So they lived there, made life a bit more acceptable for the people, and when the hopping started, they all went out into the fields. One day while they were out hopping, a fire started, and it simply went from one end to the other and wiped out all the huts and all their belongings. So Friends Ambulance Service, which was Friends Ambulance Unit, which was another Quaker organisation, were brought in with a lorry load of tents. And so the people lived in tents. Now we're talking about September, October, and obviously this was not going to be suitable after that. So my mother was arguing with Petersfield Council to be housed, for the whole population to be housed in what had been the workhouse. And the council said, oh, no, we've got all our equipment there in case there's an emergency. Well, of course, this was an emergency, and my mother got her way, and they all moved in. This was, of course, during term time, as far as I was concerned. And I came home for Christmas, and I actually had Christmas Day in the workhouse. We had a great bit of entertainment made up from anybody who wanted to have a go, and the staff did some of 1066 and all that. And I remember that my father and I were two of the three saints who came from Rome. They all left Rome to escape their wives. Now I can't remember now, but it was all good fun to do. And this situation carried on for months. But meantime, the Friends Ambulance Unit sent a team down to build a series of brick houses, small houses, near to the camp village called Weston. And in the summer, we all moved in there, and eventually my parents weren't needed there, it just became a village. And so they moved on, went to London, and took on the work at the Friends Meeting House in Stoke Newington, a wonderful Egyptian-style building where they ran youth clubs, among other things. And that was where I used to come home to on holiday. And when it came to the buzz bombs, the V1s, which were automatic, and you heard them coming with a very particular grinding noise, and as long as it was still, the engine was still going, you were fine. You could get worried when the engine stopped, but if it had flown over you, you were all right. So I cycled from Stoke Newington down to near Guildford, where we made some friends when we were in Petersfield, and I went there to escape from the buzz bombs. Of course, after an hour there, I heard the familiar noise, and one came right over and went on and on and on. Obviously, navigationally on the wrong track. When the V2 started, we knew nothing about what was happening. Peter and I were standing on the pavement at Stoke Newington. My father was standing in the door frame of the front door, and we were just chatting, and suddenly we felt, my father especially inside this frame, felt a pressure shock. And then quite a few seconds afterwards, there was a deep explosion. We were told that evening on the news and in the papers next day that there had been a gas explosion in, I think, Chiswick. And of course, it was the first of these V2s which went up into space and then came down again. There was absolutely no way of knowing in advance. And that was the last I had in the way of the war being on, because they didn't last very long.